हेलो दोस्तों, नमस्कार। स्वागत है आपका इस यूट्यूब चैनल पर अ बेटर डे में। और आज मैं आपके लिए हाजिर हूँ आपका रीडर बन के। और आज हम पढ़ेंगे इस चैनल की पहली बुक, जो है चिकन सूप फॉर द कपल सोल। बुक बहुत इंटरेस्टिंग है और ये लिखी है जैक कैनफील्ड ने, मार्क विक्टर हैंसन ने। तो दिस बुक जो है ये न्यूयॉर्क टाइम्स में नंबर 1 बेस्ट सेलिंग ऑथर्स में रही है। और ये बुक है इंस्पिरेशनल स्टोरीज अबाउट लव एंड रिलेशनशिप। तो दिस सीरीज इज गोना बी very interesting, and when the first topic of this book is love and intimacy. Isn't it exciting, right? So we'll read chapter by chapter, and the first chapter itself has many parts. So we'll make episode by episode, and then you can listen it and enjoy it, and I'll try to do my best job for you guys. Okay, so we'll start the first chapter, which is love and intimacy. तो दोस्तों, जो आज की हमारी स्टोरी है वो है लव एंड इंटीमेसी चैप्टर से थिंकिंग ऑफ यू, जो कि लिखी है अलीसिया ने। तो चलिए फिर शुरू करते हैं। थॉमस कैम्पबेल ने क्या खूब कहा है, टू लिव इन हार्ट्स वी लीव बिहाइंड इज नॉट टू डाई। Sophie's face faded into the grey winter light of the sitting room. She dozed in the armchair that Joe had bought for her on their 14th anniversary. The room was warm and quiet. Outside, it was snowing lightly. At 1:15, the mailman turned the corner into Allen Street. He was behind on his route, not because of the snow, but because it was Valentine's Day and there was more mail than usual. So he passed Sophie's house without looking up. 20 minutes later, he climbed back into his truck and drove off. Sophie stood when she heard the mail truck pull away. Then took off her glasses and wiped her mouth and eyes with the handkerchief she always carried in her sleeve. She pushed herself up using the arm of the chair for support, straightened slowly and smoothed the lap of her dark green house dress. Her slippers made a soft, shuffling sound on the bare floor as she walked to the kitchen. She stopped at the sink to wash the 2 dishes she had left on the counter after lunch. Then she filled a plastic cup halfway with water and took her pills. It was 1:45. There was a rocker in the sitting room by the front window. Sophie eased herself into it. In a half an hour, the children would be passing by on their way home from school. Sophie waited, rocking and watching the snow. The boys came first, as always, running and calling out things Sophie could not hear. Today they were making snowballs. As they went, throwing them to one another, one snowball missed and smacked hard into Sophie's window. She jerked backward and the rocker slipped off the edge of her oval rag rug. The girls dilly-dalled after the boys in 2 and 3s, cupping their mittened hands over their mouths and giggling. Sophie wondered if they were telling each other about the valentines they had received at school. One pretty girl with long brown hair stopped and pointed to the window where Sophie sat watching. Sophie slipped her face behind the traps, suddenly self-conscious. When she looked out again, the boys and girls were gone. It was cold by the window, but she stayed there watching the snow cover the children's footprints. A florist truck turned onto Allen Street. Sophie followed it with her eyes. It was moving slowly. Twice it stopped and started again. Then the driver pulled up in front of Mrs. Mason's house next door and parked. Who would be sending Mrs. Mason's flower? Sophie's wondered. Her daughter in Wisconsin or her brother? No, her brother was very ill. It was probably her daughter. How nice of her. Flowers made Sophie think of Joe, and for a moment she let the aching memory fill her. Tomorrow was the 15th, 8 months since his death. The flower man was knocking at Mrs. Mason's front door. He carried a long white and green box and a clipboard. No one seemed to be answering. Of course, it was Friday. Mrs. Mason quilted the church on Friday afternoons. The delivery man looked around, then started toward Sophie's house. Sophie sobbed herself out of the rocker and stood close to the traps. The man knocked. Her hands trembled as she straightened her hair. She reached her front hall on his third knock. Yes, she said, peering around slightly opened door. Good afternoon, ma'am. The man said loudly. Would you take a delivery of your neighbor? Yes, Sophie answered, pulling the door wide open. Where would you like me to put them? The man asked politely as he strode in. In the kitchen, please. On the table, the man looked big to Sophie. She could hardly see his face between his green cap and full beard. Sophie was glad he left quickly, and she locked the door after him. The box was as long as the kitchen table. Sophie drew near to it and bent over to read the lettering. Natalie's flower for every occasion. The rich smell of roses fled her. She closed her eyes and took slower breath, imagining yellow roses. Joe had always chosen yellow. To my sunshine, he would say, presenting the extravagant bouquet. He would laugh delightedly, kiss her on the forehead, then take her hands in his and sing to her, You are my sunshine. It was 5 o'clock when Mrs. Mason knocked at Sophie's front door. Sophie was still at the kitchen table. The flower was now open though, and she had the roses on her lap. Swaying slightly and stroking the delicate yellow petals, Mrs. Mason knocked again, but Sophie did not hear her. And after several minutes, the neighbor left. Sophie rose a little while later, laying the flowers on the kitchen table. Her cheeks were flushed. She dragged a step stool across the kitchen floor and lifted a white porcelain vase from the top corner cabinet. Using a drinking glass, she filled the vase with water, then tenderly arranged the roses and greens and carried them into the sitting room. She was smiling as she reached the middle of the room. She turned slightly and began to dip and twirl in small, slow circles. She stepped lightly, gracefully around the sitting room into the kitchen, down the hall, back again. She danced till her knees grew weak, and then she dropped into the armchair and slept. At 6:15, Sophie awoke with a start. Someone was knocking on the back door this time. It was Mrs. Mason. Hello, Sophie, Mrs. Mason said. How are you? I knocked at 5 and was a little worried when you didn't come. Were you napping? She chattered as she wiped her snowy boots on the welcome mat and stepped inside. I just hate the snow, don't you? The radio says we might have 6 inches by midnight, but you can never trust them, you know. Do you remember last winter when they predicted 4 inches and we had 21? 21. And they said we would have a mild winter this year. Ha ha. I don't think it's been over zero in weeks. Do you know my oil bills was $263 last month for my little house? Sophie was only half listening. She had remembered the roses suddenly and was turning hot with shame. The empty flower box was behind her on the kitchen table. What would she say to Mrs. Mason? I don't know how much longer I can keep paying the bills. If only Alfred, God bless him, had been as careful with money as your Joseph. Joseph? Oh, good heavens. I almost forgot about the roses. Sophie's cheeks burned. She began to stammer an apology, stepping aside to reveal the empty box. Oh God, Mrs. Mason interrupted. You put the roses in water? Then you saw the card. I hope it didn't startle you to see Joseph's handwriting. Joseph had asked me to bring you the roses the first year, so I could explain for him. He didn't want to alarm you. His roses trust. I think he arranged it with the florist last April. Such a good man, your Joseph. But Sophie had stopped listening. Her heart was pounding as she picked up the small white envelope she had missed earlier. It had been lying beside the flower box all the time. With trembling hands, she removed the card. To my sunshine, it said, I love you with all my heart. Try to be happy when you think of me. Love, Joe. What a story it was. So I just hope you guys like it. This is first episode, so there may be some error in words, but it's okay. I'll improve on. To listen these stories and the books, do subscribe this channel. Okay? और मैं मिलूँगा आपको यहीं फिर से एक नई स्टोरी के साथ जो है Someone to Watch Over Me. स्टोरी बहुत इंटरेस्टिंग है और हम पढ़ रहे हैं चैप्टर 1 चिकन सूप फॉर द कपल सोल का लव एंड इंटीमेसी. ओके, चलिए फिर मैं मिलता हूँ आपसे अगले वीडियो में. तब तक के लिए आप अपना बहुत बहुत ख्याल रखें और खुश रहें. ओके, मैं हूँ आपका दोस्त एंड होस्ट. मिलता हूँ आपसे हर रोज. बाय बाय.